Now listen. When a rich family says welcome to the family, you better check the fine print. Because sometimes welcome means we tolerate you. And sometimes it means welcome to your slow and painful destruction, sweetheart. Now smile for the Christmas card. I'm just saying. When somebody hands you a fancy coffee in a mansion, maybe, just maybe, take a little sniff first. Check the vibes. Because this cup right here is about to become a whole federal investigation. And the daughter-in-law? Her name is Nina. Mid-30s, used to work at a diner, now she's married to a billionaire's son and living in one of those old money Savannah estates where the Spanish moss hangs so low it's basically eavesdropping. She thought she married into comfort. She married into a chess game, honey. And she didn't even know she was a pawn. Let's get into it.
The story. Mrs. Ashford, your latte. The cup appeared on Nina's desk like it had been summoned by magic. White ceramic, the family crest embossed in gold on the side, steam curling up in a perfect ribbon. The young assistant who delivered it wouldn't meet her eyes. Thank you, Gemma. Nina wrapped her fingers around the warm porcelain. You don't have to call me Mrs. Ashford, you know. Nina's fine. Gemma's smile flickered like a dying bulb. Mr. Harlan prefers formal address for family members. She was already backing toward the door. Enjoy your morning. The door clicked shut. Nina sat alone in the transition office, a converted sitting room in the roastery headquarters that smelled like old books and fresh anxiety. 3 weeks married. 3 weeks of learning which fork to use, which topics to avoid, which rooms she wasn't supposed to enter without an escort. She lifted the cup to her lips. The first sip tasted wrong. Not bitter, not burnt, just thick, like the coffee had texture it shouldn't have. She pulled the cup back and frowned at the surface. Normal, caramel-colored. Fine. You're being paranoid, she told herself. You've been paranoid since the wedding. She took another sip, then another. By the fourth, something cold slithered through her stomach. Nina, there you are. The voice hit her like a silk hammer. Blythe Kensington Harwell, the family's brand guardian, which apparently meant she got paid 6 figures to make sure nobody embarrassed the Ashford name. Swept into the room on heels that cost more than Nina's first car. We need to discuss the launch. Blythe's smile was perfect. Porcelain. The kind of smile that made you check your back for knives. 72 hours, and you'll be the face of the new line. Exciting, isn't it? Nina's head felt swimmy. The face. Caleb didn't tell you? Blythe's eyebrow arched with theatrical surprise. Oh dear. Well, Harlan decided the rebrand needs a story. Rags to riches. The waitress who married an Ashford and now represents everything we stand for. She clasped her hands together. It's perfect. I'm not a waitress anymore. Of course not, darling. That's the point. Blythe circled the desk, trailing her fingers along the mahogany edge. You'll read from the teleprompter. Smile. Don't improvise. And whatever you do, don't mention the diner. We're reframing your past as humble origins in hospitality. Much more palatable. The room tilted slightly. Nina gripped the edge of the desk. Are you all right? Blythe's concern was a masterpiece of insincerity. You look a bit green. I'm fine. The words came out thin. Just tired. Blythe studied her like a specimen. Well, get some rest. You'll need to look fresh for cameras. She turned toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Nina, try not to embarrass Caleb. He's risked quite a lot for you. It would be a shame if his investment didn't pay off. The door closed. Nina's stomach lurched. She made it to the private bathroom just in time. Not to be sick, though her body threatened it. but to splash cold water on her face and grip the sink until her knuckles went white. Something's wrong. The weakness had come on fast. Too fast. Her limbs felt heavy, her thoughts wrapped in gauze. She'd been fine this morning. Better than fine. She'd woken up in Caleb's arms, actually believing, for one stupid, hopeful moment, that this life might work. Now her hands were shaking. She looked at her reflection, a woman she barely recognized. Designer dress she didn't pick. Hairstyled by someone else's hands. A thin gold necklace that had belonged to Caleb's late mother. Given to her by Harlan with a smile that never reached his eyes. A sweet experiment, he'd called her at last week's dinner. Let's see how she holds up. She'd laughed it off. Caleb had squeezed her hand under the table. But she'd seen the look Harlan gave her when he thought she wasn't watching. Calculation. Assessment. The way you look at something you're deciding whether to keep or discard. Nina splashed more water. Breathed. Steadied. Then she walked back to her desk and picked up the coffee cup. Something caught her eye. The lid. She'd set it aside when she started drinking. Now, in the light from the window, she could see something on the underside. Not coffee. Something darker. A thick, black residue clinging to the ceramic like tar. Her throat tightened. She grabbed a tissue and carefully wiped the lid. The black substance smeared, then revealed something underneath. A faint embossed symbol pressed into the ceramic itself. Nina's heart stopped. She knew that crest. She'd seen it exactly once, on the door of Harlan's private tasting room. The room where only family and senior executives were allowed. The room with its own coffee service, its own cups, its own everything. This cup hadn't come from the staff kitchen. This cup had come from inside the inner circle. Nina pocketed the lid, her hands steadier now than they'd been all morning. Because fear had transformed into something else. Something sharper. Someone in this family just made a very big mistake.
Oh, she kept the lid. She kept the evidence. Now see, this is why I love Nina already. Most people in her situation, they'd cry. They'd call their mama. They'd pack a bag and run back to whatever small town they came from. But Nina? Nina said, no ma'am, somebody's gonna answer for this. And that black goo? Baby, I've seen a lot of things in coffee. Milk that's turned. Sugar that didn't dissolve. My ex-husband's audacity. But tar? In a billionaire's private cup? That's not an accident. That's a message. The question is, who sent it? Was it Harlan, the father-in-law who looks at Nina like she's a stain on his silk tablecloth? Was it Blythe, Miss Don't Embarrass the Family with her smile that could cut glass? Or is there somebody else lurking in that big old mansion, somebody we haven't even met yet? And why did the assistant look so nervous delivering that cup? The plot is thickening, honey. Just like that mysterious goo. Next chapter, we're gonna find out what happens when Nina goes digging for answers. And let me tell you, when you start pulling threads in a rich family sweater, the whole thing tends to unravel. Stay with me.
The clinic waiting room smelled like lavender and money. Not the antiseptic sharpness of the free clinic Nina used to visit back home, where the chairs were plastic and the wait was 3 hours. Here, the chairs were leather. The wait was 4 minutes. And the doctor wore a Rolex. Mrs. Ashford, Dr. Pembroke, silver hair, kind eyes, the Ashford family physician for 30 years, studied her chart with practiced neutrality. Your vitals are stable now. Blood pressure's normalized. No signs of acute poisoning. Nina's fingers tightened on her purse strap. Poisoning. I said no signs. He removed his glasses. But you described nausea, weakness, disorientation. Those symptoms came on quickly after ingesting something. I have to ask, do you have any idea what might have been in that coffee? The lid burned in her pocket like a secret. I don't know, she said carefully. It just tasted off. Dr. Pembroke nodded slowly. Too slowly. Well, sometimes stress manifests physically. A new marriage, a new family, new expectations. The body keeps score, as they say. He scribbled something on a prescription pad. Mild sedative. For the anxiety. I'm not anxious. I was sick. Of course. His smile was gentle, dismissive. Rest up, Mrs. Ashford. Big launch coming, I hear. The family's counting on you. Caleb was waiting outside the clinic, leaning against his car like a man trying to look casual while his whole body screamed worry. The moment he saw her, he straightened. What did he say? That I'm stressed. Nina walked past him toward the passenger door. Apparently being mysteriously ill is just my body keeping score. Nina. He caught her arm. Gentle. Always gentle. Talk to me. Please. She turned to face him. God, he was beautiful. That was the problem, wasn't it? Those warm brown eyes. That jaw that could cut glass. The way he looked at her like she was the only person in the world. She'd fallen for that look. Fallen hard and fast, married faster. Now she wondered if she'd been falling into a trap. Something was in my coffee, Caleb. His brow furrowed. What do you mean? I mean there was black residue under the lid. I mean the cup came from your father's private tasting room. She pulled the lid from her pocket, held it up. I mean someone with access to that room put something in my drink, and I need to know if you know anything about it. The silence stretched between them like a wire. You think my father. I don't know what I think. Her voice cracked. I just know I felt fine this morning, and then I drank that coffee, and suddenly I couldn't stand up straight. And your family's doctor just handed me a prescription for sedatives, like I'm some hysterical housewife. Caleb's jaw tightened. He took the lid, turned it over, studied the faint crest embossed on the ceramic. This is from the tasting room, he said quietly. I know. My father doesn't let anyone use those cups. Not even me. I know. He looked up at her, and for a moment, just a moment, she saw something crack behind his eyes. Fear. Doubt. The terrible recognition that the world you grew up in might not be what you thought. I'll talk to him. Caleb. I'll handle it. He pulled her close, pressed his lips to her forehead. I promise. Whatever this is, I'll fix it. Nina let herself be held, but she didn't close her eyes. She'd stopped closing her eyes in this family. Sunday brunch at the Ashford estate was a performance art piece disguised as a meal. The table stretched 12 feet long, draped in white linen, dotted with fresh peonies. Crystal glasses caught the morning light. Silver clinked against porcelain. And at the head of it all sat Harlan Ashford, patriarch, philanthropist, the man who'd built a hospitality empire from nothing and never let anyone forget it. Caleb tells me you had a little spell yesterday. Harlan cut into his eggs Benedict with surgical precision. Feeling better? Nina felt Blythe's eyes on her from across the table. Mr. Pike, Harlan's operations man, silent as a shadow, stood near the doorway, hands clasped. Much better, Nina said. Thank you for asking. Good. Good. Harlan chewed, swallowed, dabbed his napkin. The launch is critical. 200 investors, press coverage, the whole 9 yards. We need everyone performing at their best. I understand. Do you? He set down his fork. Because when I invited you into this family, Nina, I took a risk. A considerable one. People in our circle don't usually marry outside it. Caleb's hand found hers under the table. Squeezed. Father, he started. I'm not being cruel, son. I'm being honest. Harlan's gaze never left Nina. Your wife is a sweet experiment. I've always believed in giving people chances they haven't earned. But chances can be revoked. He smiled. If the experiment doesn't hold up. The table went silent. Blythe studied her mimosa like it held the secrets of the universe. Mr. Pike didn't move. Nina's blood roared in her ears. Don't react. That's what he wants. Don't give him the satisfaction. She lifted her coffee cup, took a deliberate sip, set it down. I appreciate your honesty, Harlan. Her voice came out steady, calmer than she felt. And I understand your concern. But I didn't marry your money or your name. I married your son. And I intend to honor that commitment, whether the experiment holds up or not. Something flickered across Harlan's face. Surprise? Respect? Or just recalculation? Well, he picked up his fork again. We'll see. After brunch, Nina excused herself to the garden. She needed air. She needed to think. She needed to not be in a room where everyone was measuring her like a dress that didn't quite fit. She didn't hear Blythe approach until the voice was right behind her. That was brave. Stupid, but brave. Nina turned. Blythe stood on the garden path, heels somehow not sinking into the grass, arms crossed. I wasn't trying to be either. Blythe tilted her head. You know, I actually like you, Nina. Against my better judgment. You've got spine. Most of Harlan's targets just crumble. Targets. Blythe's laugh was a wind chime made of ice. Oh, honey, you think you're the first outsider to marry into this family? There was Caleb's cousin's wife. Lasted 8 months before she decided the marriage wasn't working. There was the business partner's daughter, 6 months. The pattern is consistent. Nina's stomach dropped. What are you saying? I'm saying Harlan doesn't lose. He doesn't compromise. And he doesn't accept people who threaten his vision of what this family should be. Blythe stepped closer. I'm the brand guardian, Nina. I protect the Ashford image. And right now, you're a liability. Because I got sick? Because you're difficult. Blythe's smile sharpened. You ask questions. You notice things. You kept that coffee lid instead of throwing it away. Yes, she raised a hand at Nina's expression. I know about that. I know about everything that happens in this house. Then you know someone put something in my drink. I know you believe that. Blythe's voice dripped sympathy. And I know how that looks to outsiders. The nervous new bride, overwhelmed by her new life, inventing threats to explain why she can't cope. It's textbook, really. Almost predictable. Nina's hands curled into fists. You're trying to gaslight me. I'm trying to help you. Blythe sighed. Look, I've arranged for a wellness consultant. Nutrition, stress management, some light media training. Consider it a gift. It sounds like a leash. It sounds like survival, darling. Blythe turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Nina, that lid you're holding onto? Whatever you think it proves, let it go. Some doors are better left closed. She walked away, heels clicking on stone. Nina stood alone in the garden, surrounded by flowers that cost more than her childhood home. The lid was still in her pocket. The questions were still in her head. And now she knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened to her wasn't random. It was a system, a pattern, and she'd just been added to the list. That night, Nina couldn't sleep. Caleb had talked to his father. He denied everything. Caleb reported, frustration tight in his voice. Said the tasting room was locked all morning. Said you probably just had a reaction to something. And you believe him? Caleb had hesitated. Just a half second. But she'd seen it. Now she lay in the dark, listening to her husband breathe, and pulled out her phone. She navigated to the roastery's internal security portal. Caleb had given her access as a courtesy when she joined the family. She found the footage from yesterday morning. The hallway outside her office. 9:47 a.m. Gemma entering with the cup. 9:52 a.m. Gemma leaving. She scrolled back. 9:30 a.m. The hallway was empty. 9:35 a.m. Still empty. 9:37 a.m. The footage jumped. The timestamp showed 9:47. 10 minutes. Missing. Nina's heart hammered. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't stressed. She wasn't some hysterical housewife. The footage had been edited. Someone had erased 10 minutes exactly when that cup was being prepared. And whoever did it had access to the security system, which meant whoever did it had power. Real power.
The footage is missing. 10 whole minutes just poof, gone. Deleted. Vanished into the rich people void where evidence goes to die. Baby, let me tell you something. When regular folks commit crimes, they leave fingerprints. When rich folks commit crimes, they leave gaps. Convenient little holes in the record where the truth used to be. And did y'all catch what Blythe said? That Nina's not the first? That other wives have decided their marriages weren't working? That there's a pattern? This ain't just about coffee, honey. This is about control. This is about a family that builds people up just so they can tear them down. And Nina? Nina just figured out she's not fighting one person. She's fighting a whole system. But here's what I love about our girl. She's not crying. She's not packing. She's lying in bed next to her husband, pulling up security footage and doing her own investigation. That's not a victim, baby. That's a woman who's about to burn something down. Question is, how deep does this go? And is Caleb part of the problem or just another pawn who doesn't know he's being played? Next chapter, things are about to get real uncomfortable. Stay with me.
The roastery floor hummed with activity, industrial grinders whirring, beans cascading in assorting trays, the rich scent of fresh roast hanging in the air like a promise. Nina had always loved coffee. The ritual of it, the warmth, the way it turned strangers into friends across diner counters. Now the smell made her stomach turn. Mrs. Ashford? Nina turned. A young woman in a roastery apron stood near the quality control station, clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair escaping from a practical bun. The look of someone who'd been running on fumes for weeks. I'm sorry, do I know you? Destiny Williams. Shift lead for morning production. The woman glanced around nervously. I heard about your incident. The coffee. Nina's pulse quickened. What about it? Destiny stepped closer, lowering her voice. I'm not supposed to talk to you. Blythe made that real clear this morning. Said family matters stay with family. She swallowed hard. But I've worked here 6 years. I know how things move in this building. And that cup that made you sick? It didn't come from our floor. Where did it come from? Upstairs. Destiny's eyes flicked toward the ceiling. The private tasting room. Someone brought it down around 9:30, handed it to Gemma, told her to deliver it to your office. No ticket, no order log. Just, here, take this to the new Mrs. Ashford. Nina's heart hammered. Who? Who brought it down? I don't know. I just saw the handoff from across the floor. Destiny's voice dropped even lower. But Mrs. Ashford, Nina, I've seen things happen in this company. People who ask questions get transferred, demoted, let go with nice severance packages and NDAs thick as phone books. She pressed the clipboard tighter to her chest. I can't lose this job. I've got a mama with medical bills and a sister in community college. But I also can't watch them do to you what they did to the others. Others? Destiny's face shuddered. I've said too much already. Please. Nina grabbed her arm. Gentle, but urgent. What others? What happened to them? For a long moment, Destiny just stared at her. Then she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside was a wooden stick, thin, elegant, stamped with tiny numbers. I found this near the service elevator after your coffee was delivered. It's a tasting room stir stick. They're custom-made, numbered, kept in a locked drawer. She pressed the bag into Nina's palm. Each one traces back to whoever checked it out. If you can get into that drawer, you can find out who handled your cup. Nina looked at the stick. Such a small thing. Such a tiny piece of wood. Such a dangerous weapon. Why are you helping me? Destiny's jaw tightened. Because the last wife who got sick? She didn't ask questions. She just disappeared. And I'm tired of pretending that's normal. She turned and walked away before Nina could respond. Caleb found her in the garden that evening, sitting on the stone bench where they'd had their first kiss. Back when everything felt possible. Back when his family was just a name, not a machine. You've been avoiding me. Nina didn't look up. I've been thinking. About what? He sat beside her. Close, but not touching. Like he wasn't sure he had permission anymore. About whether I can trust you. The words hung in the air. Caleb flinched like she'd slapped him. Nina, did you know? She finally turned to face him. About the other wives? The ones who got sick, got scared, got handled. His expression cracked. Where did you hear that? Does it matter? She pulled the stir stick from her pocket. This came from your father's private tasting room. It was near the elevator right after my coffee was delivered. It's numbered, Caleb. Traceable. Someone in your father's inner circle made that cup and sent it to me. Caleb stared at the stick. His hands were shaking. I didn't know, he said quietly. About the others. I swear to you, Nina. I knew my father was difficult, controlling. I knew he didn't approve of us. But I never thought he'd actually. His voice broke. You have to believe me. Nina wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. He looked so broken sitting there, his perfect facade crumbling, the golden boy confronting the tarnish underneath. But wanting to believe and believing were different things. Then help me prove it. She pressed the stick into his hand. Get me into that tasting room. Let me see the inventory log. Let me find out who checked out this stick. Caleb's face went pale. That room is always locked. My father has the only key. Then find another way in. Nina, if he catches us. If he catches us what? She stood up, anger finally breaking through. He'll make me sick again? He'll disappear me like the other wives? He's already trying to destroy me, Caleb. The only question is whether you're going to help me fight back or stand there watching while your family buries me. The words echoed across the garden. Somewhere, a bird startled and flew away. Caleb stood slowly. His eyes were wet. Okay, he whispered. Okay, I'll get you in. The tasting room was on the third floor of the roastery headquarters, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Savannah River. Nina had seen it exactly once, during her initial welcome tour. Harlan had opened the door just long enough to show off the mahogany tasting table and the wall of rare coffee samples before ushering her out. Family only, he'd said with that thin smile. Maybe someday. Now it was 11 p.m., and Nina was using Caleb's master key card to slip through a side entrance. The room was dark. She didn't turn on the lights. Too risky. Just used her phone flashlight to navigate. The mahogany table gleamed. The coffee samples lined the walls and glass cases like museum exhibits. And there, in the corner, was the cabinet Destiny had mentioned. Locked. Nina pulled out a bobby pin. An old skill from a past life. When she'd had to break into her own apartment after losing keys she couldn't afford to replace. The lock was fancier than anything she'd picked before, but the principle was the same. Click. The drawer slid open. Inside, rows of numbered stir sticks, each in its own slot. A leather logbook beside them. Nina grabbed the book and flipped through the pages. Each entry was meticulous. Date, time, stick number, name of person who checked it out. She found the date of her incident, found the timestamp, found the stick number that matched the one Destiny had given her. And there, in neat handwriting, was the name H. Pike. Mr. Pike, Harlan's operations man, the silent shadow who stood in doorways and handled problems. Her hands trembled. She photographed the page, then carefully returned everything to its place. She was closing the drawer when the lights snapped on. Mrs. Ashford. Nina spun around. Harlan stood in the doorway. He wore a silk robe over pajamas, but his eyes were sharp, alert, like he'd been waiting for this. "I must say," he said, stepping into the room, "I'm impressed. Most people in your position would have given up by now. Run home crying. Accepted the settlement and the NDA." Nina's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I'm not most people." "No." He smiled. That cold, calculating smile. "You're not." He crossed to the cabinet, looked at the drawer she'd just closed, made no move to open it. "You think you found something," he said. "Some piece of evidence that proves the big bad billionaire is out to get you. And maybe you're right." He turned to face her. "But here's what you don't understand, Nina. Evidence is only useful if someone believes it. And who's going to believe you? A former waitress with no money, no connections, no family name? Against me? Caleb will believe me. Will he?" Harlan's voice was soft, almost gentle. "Caleb has spent his whole life trying to please me, trying to be worthy of this family. Do you really think he'll throw all of that away? For you?" Nina didn't answer. Couldn't. Harlan stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something expensive, something suffocating. "I offered you a graceful exit, Nina. A generous settlement. A quiet divorce. You could have walked away with more money than you've ever seen in your life." He tilted his head. "You didn't take it. Because I love your son." "Love." He said the word like it tasted sour. "Love is a luxury, Mrs. Ashford. It's what people without power use to comfort themselves. But in this family, power is what matters. And you have none." He turned and walked toward the door. Paused. "Look back. I'll give you one more chance. Leave quietly. Take the money. Pretend this marriage never happened." His eyes hardened. "Or stay and find out what happens to people who challenge me." He left. Nina stood alone in the dark tasting room, heart pounding, phone clutched in her hand. She had the photo. She had the name. She had proof. But Harlan was right about one thing. Proof meant nothing if no one believed her. She needed more. Back in her room, Nina couldn't stop staring at the photo on her phone. Pike's name, clear as day, written in the log. But something nagged at her. Pike was Harlan's man. That was obvious. But Pike didn't act alone. Pike didn't make decisions. Pike followed orders, which meant someone had told him to do this. And whoever planted that stir stick in her bag afterward, that wasn't Pike's style. Pike was a fixer, not a framer. Someone else was playing this game. Someone who wanted Nina to find exactly what she'd found. Someone who wanted her looking in one specific direction. But why? Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You're asking the right questions, but you're looking at the wrong person. The puppet is not the puppeteer. Ask yourself, who benefits if you destroy Harlan?" Nina read the message 3 times. Then she looked at the stir stick still sitting on her dresser. The trap she'd thought she was springing? Maybe she was still inside it.
Baby, did y'all feel that? The temperature in this story just dropped about 30 degrees. So let's recap what just happened. Nina did her little Nancy Drew thing, snuck into the forbidden tasting room, found the logbook, and got the name she was looking for. Pike. The silent, scary man who stands in corners and definitely knows how to make problems disappear. Open and shut case, right? Harlan's guy did it. Harlan ordered it. Boom. Justice served? Wrong. because then she gets that text. That mysterious, creepy, the puppet is not the puppeteer text. And suddenly everything Nina thought she knew gets flipped upside down and shaken like a snow globe. Think about it. Who gave Nina that stir stick in the first place? Destiny. Sweet, nervous, I can't lose my job Destiny. Who conveniently happened to find evidence that pointed directly at Harlan's inner circle. And who benefits if Nina takes down Harlan? Who's been whispering poison in everyone's ears, calling Nina a liability, running the whole intimidation campaign? Blythe. I'm not saying I know anything for certain. I'm just saying there are wheels within wheels here, honey. And Nina? Nina might be holding a knife that someone else put in her hand. Next chapter, things get real complicated. Because sometimes the villain you can see is just a distraction from the one you can't. Stay with me.
The rebrand rehearsal was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the roastery's grand tasting hall, a soaring space with exposed brick walls, industrial chandeliers, and enough seating for 200 investors and press. Nina had been dreading it all morning. Her hands hadn't stopped shaking since the text last night. The puppet is not the puppeteer. She'd traced the number. Burner phone. Untraceable. Whoever sent it knew what they were doing. And now she was supposed to stand on a stage and smile for cameras while someone in this building was playing chess with her life. Nina, there you are. Blythe descended on her like a silk tornado, clipboard in hand, earpiece blinking. Behind her trailed a makeup artist, a wardrobe consultant, and a man Nina didn't recognize holding a tablet. We need you in hair and makeup in 10 minutes. Then wardrobe. Then a quick run-through of your marks. Blythe's smile was surgical. Simple script. Just read the teleprompter. Don't improvise. Don't go off book. And whatever you do, don't mention the diner. I know. Nina's voice came out flat. You've told me 6 times. 7 now. Blythe's eyes glittered. Repetition breeds retention, darling. The makeup artist guided Nina toward a chair near the stage. Brushes appeared. Powder clouds bloomed. Someone tugged at her hair, while someone else debated whether champagne or rose gold better suited her complexion. Nina felt like a doll being dressed for someone else's game. Mrs. Ashford, the man with the tablet, appeared at her elbow. I'm Gerald, your nutrition coach. Miss Kensington Harwell arranged for me to oversee your wellness leading up to the launch. Nina stared at him. My wellness. Stress management. Dietary optimization. Hydration protocols. He tapped his tablet efficiently. Given your recent episode, we want to ensure you're performing at peak capacity. I'm not a racehorse. Gerald's smile didn't waver. Of course not. But peak performance benefits everyone, doesn't it? Nina opened her mouth to respond when a commotion near the entrance caught her attention. Voices raised. Footsteps. The distinct sound of Harlan Ashford's displeasure cutting through the noise. Who authorized this schedule? Who decided my daughter-in-law needed to rehearse today? Nina turned. Harlan was striding across the hall, his face thunderous. Behind him, Mr. Pike followed like a silent shadow. Blythe stepped forward, clipboard raised like a shield. Mr. Ashford, the timeline. The timeline is my decision, not yours. Harlan stopped in front of Nina's chair. For a long moment, he just looked at her, studied her face, the shadows under her eyes, the way her hands gripped the armrests. Then he did something Nina never expected. He turned to the room and raised his voice. Everyone out. Now. The rehearsal is postponed. Silence. Shocked, absolute silence. Mr. Ashford, Blythe started. Did I stutter? Harlan's voice was ice. Send the crew home. Paid. Full day rate. The schedule was my mistake, and I'm correcting it. The room erupted into confused motion. Crew members exchanging glances. Equipment being powered down. Blythe's face cycling through shock, anger, and something that looked almost like fear. Gerald stepped forward. "Sir, perhaps Mrs. Ashford would benefit from you." Harlan pointed at him. "You're fired." Gerald blinked. "Excuse me. I heard you in the hallway yesterday, making jokes about my daughter-in-law's delicate constitution, laughing with the catering staff about how long she'd last." Harlan's voice dropped to something lethal. "That's not wellness coaching. That's cruelty. Get out of my building." Gerald's face went white. He looked to Blythe for support, but she was already backing away, suddenly very interested in her clipboard. "Security will escort you out," Harlan continued. "Don't expect a reference." Gerald fled. Nina sat frozen in her chair, makeup half done, completely unable to process what had just happened. Harlan turned back to her. His expression softened, not warm, exactly, but no longer predatory. "When did you last eat?" "What?" "Eat. Food. When did you last have a proper meal?" Nina tried to remember. Yesterday? The day before? She'd been so focused on investigation, on survival, that basic needs had fallen away. I'm not sure." Harlan nodded like this confirmed something. He pulled out his phone, typed quickly. "There's a private dining room on the 4th floor. I'm having lunch sent up. Soup. Bread. Nothing that will upset your stomach." He met her eyes. "You need rest, Nina. Real rest. Not whatever performance Blythe has been demanding. Why are you doing this?" The question came out before she could stop it. Raw. Suspicious. Honest. Harlan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different. Older. Tired. "Because I've made mistakes. And some mistakes compound." He looked away. "Go eat. Sleep. The launch can wait one more day." He turned and walked out, Pike trailing behind. Nina sat in the empty hall, surrounded by abandoned equipment and dying stage lights, and tried to make sense of a world that had just tilted sideways. Caleb found her in the 4th floor dining room an hour later. She was halfway through a bowl of butternut squash soup, the first real food she'd eaten in days. "I heard what happened." He slid into the chair across from her. "My father shut down the rehearsal. Fired my nutrition coach, too. Called him cruel." Nina set down her spoon. "Caleb, what is going on?" "I don't know." He ran a hand through his hair. "I've never seen him like that. He doesn't do that. Not for anyone. Not even for me. Maybe it's a strategy. Make me trust him, then. Maybe." Caleb reached across the table, took her hand. "Or maybe he's actually capable of something other than control. I don't know. I've spent my whole life trying to figure out what he actually feels, and I'm still lost." Nina looked at their intertwined fingers. His thumb traced circles on her palm. "I overheard something," she said quietly. "Last night, after he caught me in the tasting room. He was talking to Pike in the hallway. He said, 'Not like this. Not anymore.'" She looked up. "What do you think that means?" Caleb's face went pale. "He said that. Word for word. Then he knows." Caleb pulled his hand back, pressed both palms to his forehead. "He knows what Pike did. He probably ordered it. But something changed. Something made him regret it. My father doesn't do regret." Caleb laughed bitterly. "He does damage control. He does reputation management. But regret." He shook his head. "That would require admitting he was wrong." Nina thought about the look on Harlan's face when he'd shut down the rehearsal. The weariness. The way he'd said some mistakes compound. What if he's not as simple as we thought? He's not simple at all. That's the problem. Caleb stood, paced to the window. The Savannah River glittered below, indifferent to the drama above. "My father built this empire from nothing. Did you know that? He grew up poor. Dirt poor. The kind of poor where you don't know if you're eating tomorrow." Nina hadn't known. Harlan carried himself like someone who'd been born into wealth, not someone who'd clawed his way into it. He never talks about it, Caleb continued. But I found records once. Old newspaper clippings. He started as a busboy, worked his way up, bought his first cafe with money he saved over 15 years. He turned back to face her. And somewhere along the way, he decided that poverty was a disease. Something to be eradicated. Something to be ashamed of. So when he looks at me, he sees his past. The past he spent 50 years trying to bury. Caleb's voice cracked. I'm not excusing him. What he did to you is unforgivable. But maybe understanding him helps us figure out what comes next. Nina was quiet for a long moment. Someone sent me a text last night, she finally said. Anonymous. They said I'm looking at the wrong person. That the puppet isn't the puppeteer. Caleb frowned. What does that mean? I don't know. But I found this in my bag after the tasting room. She pulled out the stir stick, the one Destiny had given her. Someone planted it. Someone wanted me to find Pike's name in that log. Someone is steering me somewhere specific. Steering you toward my father. Yes. Nina met his eyes. Which means maybe your father isn't the only thread in this family. The words hung in the air. Outside, the sun was setting over the river, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Beautiful, peaceful, completely at odds with the storm building inside the Ashford Empire. What do we do? Caleb asked. Nina looked at the stir stick in her hand. Such a small thing. Such a carefully placed breadcrumb. We stop following the trail someone laid for us, she said. And we start making our own. That night, Nina couldn't sleep again. But this time, it wasn't fear keeping her awake. It was questions. Why had Harlan protected her today? Why fire Gerald? Why shut down the rehearsal? If he wanted her gone, he could have let her collapse on stage. Let the cameras catch her weakness. Let the narrative write itself. Unstable outsider can't handle pressure. Marriage annulled. Family reputation preserved. Instead, he'd shielded her. Publicly. At cost to himself. Investors would be annoyed, schedules disrupted, money wasted. Not like this. Not anymore. What had changed? Her phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. You're getting closer. But you're still not asking the right question. Who hired Blythe? And why does she answer to someone other than Harlan? Nina's blood went cold. She'd assumed Blythe was Harlan's creature. His enforcer. His brand guardian. But what if she was wrong? What if Blythe was guarding someone else's brand entirely?
When a villain suddenly gets gentle, don't clap yet. Sometimes the trap is velvet. I'd still watch this whole episode twice, though. Because here's the thing. Harlan did something genuinely decent today. He protected Nina when he didn't have to. He fired a man who was mocking her. He gave her food and rest and space. And I hate that I don't know what it means. Is he playing the long game? Softening her up so the next betrayal hits harder? Or is there actually a human being buried somewhere under all that Armani and ambition? Because here's what I keep coming back to. Harlan grew up poor. Just like Nina. He knows exactly what it feels like to be looked down on, dismissed, treated like you don't belong. So when he looks at her, does he see a threat to his empire? Or does he see a mirror he's been running from his whole life? I don't know, babies. I genuinely don't know. But I do know this, that mysterious texter just dropped another bomb. Blythe might not be Harlan's creature at all. Blythe might be working for someone else entirely. And if Harlan isn't the puppeteer, then who the hell is pulling the strings? Next chapter, the launch is happening whether Nina's ready or not. And something tells me the truth is about to come out in the most public way possible. Stay with me.
Launch day arrived with the kind of perfect Savannah morning that belonged on postcards. Spanish moss swaying, river glittering, the roastery headquarters gleaming like a temple to good taste and better marketing. Nina hadn't slept. She'd spent the night piecing together fragments. The stir stick, the missing footage, Harlan's unexpected kindness, the anonymous texts, and the question that kept circling her mind like a vulture. Who hired Blythe? The answer had come at 3 a.m., buried in old press releases she'd found on the company website. Blythe Kensington Harwell hadn't been hired by Harlan at all. She'd been brought in 3 years ago by the board of directors, specifically by the chairman of that board, a man named Victor Ashford, Harlan's brother, a brother nobody had mentioned, a brother whose name appeared nowhere in family photos, a brother who, according to public records, owned a significant minority stake in the company and had been quietly accumulating more. Nina had finally found the puppeteer. Now she just had to prove it. You look beautiful. Caleb stood in the doorway of her dressing room, wearing a suit that cost more than her childhood home. His eyes were soft, worried, hopeful. I look like a hostage in designer clothes. Nina adjusted the collar of her silk blouse. This isn't me, Caleb. I know. He crossed to her, took her hands. But after today, it's done. The launch happens, you smile for the cameras, and then we figure out what comes next. Together. What if I don't want to smile? He blinked. What do you mean? Nina had made a decision somewhere around 4 a.m. Somewhere between her third cup of coffee and her 100th read-through of the press releases. She was done being moved around the board. Done being the pawn in someone else's game. I mean, I'm not reading from the teleprompter. Nina, someone in this family has been setting me up from the beginning. Not just Harlan. Someone else. Someone who's been using Blythe to run interference while they position themselves for, I don't know what. A takeover. A coup. Something. Caleb's face went pale. Who? Your uncle. Victor. The name landed like a grenade. Caleb stepped back, shaking his head. That's impossible. Victor hasn't been involved with the company in years. He and my father had a falling out. He's chairman of the board, Caleb. He brought in Blythe. And I'd bet everything I have that he's the one who's been sending me those texts. Steering me toward Harlan. Trying to make me destroy your father, so he can sweep in and pick up the pieces. But the coffee. Pike. That was my father's. Maybe. Or maybe Pike takes orders from whoever's paying him. And right now, I think Victor's checkbook is bigger than Harlan's ego. Caleb sat down heavily on the dressing room couch. He looked like a man watching his world rearrange itself into unfamiliar shapes. What are you going to do? Nina met his eyes in the mirror. I'm going to find out the truth. On camera. In front of everyone. The grand tasting hall was transformed. 200 chairs arranged in precise rows. Camera crews from 3 different networks. Investors in suits that probably cost more than Nina's annual salary back at the diner. Press credentials gleaming under the industrial chandeliers. And at the front of it all, a stage. A podium. A teleprompter loaded with words Nina had never agreed to say. Nina Ashford. From humble origins to hospitality royalty. She wanted to gag. Places everyone. Blythe's voice cut through the pre-show chatter. She spotted Nina near the stage entrance and descended like a hawk. There you are. Remember, teleprompter, smile, don't improvise. 15 minutes, and this nightmare is over. Whose nightmare? Nina asked quietly. Blythe's smile flickered. Just for a second. Everyone's, darling. Trust me. The lights dimmed. Music swelled. A voice announced the beginning of Ashford Coffee's bold new chapter. Nina walked onto the stage. The applause was polite, measured. 200 faces stared up at her. Curious, skeptical, waiting to be convinced. She could see Harlan in the front row, expression unreadable. Caleb beside him, jaw tight. Blythe near the wings, clipboard clutched like a weapon. And in the back corner, a man Nina had never met in person but recognized from photos. Victor Ashford, silver-haired, distinguished, watching with the patient eyes of a predator who'd already won. Nina stepped up to the podium. The teleprompter glowed. "Good afternoon. I'm Nina Ashford, and I'm honored to be part of this family." She didn't read it. "Good afternoon," she said instead. "I'm Nina Ashford. 3 weeks ago, I married into this family. And 1 week ago, someone tried to make me very sick." A ripple went through the crowd. Murmurs. Shifting. Blythe's face went white. "I was given a cup of coffee that came from the private tasting room upstairs. A room that only family and senior executives can access. That coffee contained something it shouldn't have. And when I started asking questions, I discovered that this wasn't the first time." "Mrs. Ashford," Blythe started from the wings. "I'm not finished." Nina's voice didn't waver. "I was given evidence. A stir stick traced to a specific person. I found a name in the inventory log. I thought I knew who was responsible." She looked directly at Harlan. His face was stone. "But I was wrong. Someone wanted me to find that evidence. Someone was steering me toward a specific conclusion. Because the real threat to this family isn't the person whose name was in that log." She turned her gaze to the back of the room. To Victor. "The real threat is the person who hired the brand guardian standing in those wings. The person who's been quietly buying up shares for 3 years. The person who wants this company so badly they'd sacrifice an innocent woman to get it." Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "I'm not reading from the teleprompter today," Nina continued, "because the script I was given is a lie. Just like the humble origin story Blythe wanted me to tell. I'm not ashamed of being a waitress. I'm not ashamed of where I came from. And I'm not going to pretend this family is something it isn't." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the stir stick. "This is from the private tasting room. It's numbered, traceable, and I'm requesting, right now, on camera, that we run a full audit of who accessed that room on the morning I got sick. Not just the name in the log. Everyone, including anyone who might have had Pike sign out items on their behalf." The room erupted. Journalists shouting questions. Investors turning to each other in alarm. Blythe frozen in the wings like a deer in headlights. And then Harlan stood up. The room fell silent. He walked to the stage, climbed the stairs, stood beside Nina at the podium. For a long moment, he just looked at her. This woman who'd just detonated a bomb in the middle of his empire. Then he leaned into the microphone. "Bring it." The next 30 minutes were chaos. Harlan, to everyone's shock, ordered an immediate audit. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Now. He had security pull the access logs, the sign-out sheets, the footage, all of it. What couldn't be restored from the glitched period, he demanded explanations for. Pike, confronted directly, broke faster than anyone expected. "Mr. Victor told me it was routine," he stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "Said Mr. Harlan had approved it. Said the substance was just a flavor modifier, nothing dangerous." He said, "Victor told you." Harlan's voice was ice. "My brother told you to put something in my daughter-in-law's coffee." Pike nodded miserably. Every camera in the room swung to the back corner. But Victor's chair was empty. He'd slipped out during the chaos. They found him 20 minutes later, trying to leave through the service entrance. Security brought him to Harlan's office, where Nina, Caleb, and a very nervous legal team were waiting. Victor Ashford didn't look like a defeated man. He looked like someone who'd lost a battle, but still expected to win the war. "You can't prove anything," he said calmly. "Pike's testimony is hearsay. Blythe will deny everything. And I have enough lawyers to tie this up for decades." "Maybe." Harlan sat behind his desk, fingers steepled. But here's what I can do, Victor. I can go public. I can tell every investor, every partner, every reporter what you tried to do. Your reputation, the one thing you've always valued more than money, will be ash. You destroy the company to spite me? I'd burn it to the ground to protect my family. The room went still. Nina watched Harlan's face. This was the man who'd called her a sweet experiment, who'd tried to push her out with settlements and NDAs, who'd ordered Pike to. No, wait. She thought back to the confrontation in the tasting room. Harlan's words. I offered you a graceful exit. He'd offered her money to leave. He'd made her feel unwelcome. But the coffee, the actual sabotage, Pike had just admitted that was Victor's order. Harlan was guilty of cruelty, of snobbery, of 100 small cuts designed to make her feel less than. But he wasn't guilty of trying to poison her. Victor was. You used me, Nina said quietly. Victor's eyes flicked to her. The texts, the stir stick, destiny finding that evidence. You set it all up to make me think Harlan was the enemy, so I'd tear him down for you. Destiny works for me, Victor admitted. Has for 2 years. She's very good at playing the sympathetic ally. Nina felt sick. The one person she trusted. The one person who'd seemed to be on her side. Another piece moved on a board she hadn't even known she was playing on. So what happens now? Caleb asked. His voice was steady, but Nina could see his hands shaking. Harlan and Victor stared at each other. Brothers. Enemies. 2 men who'd spent decades fighting a war Nina was only beginning to understand. Now, Harlan said finally, we negotiate.
The domino moment, babies. The domino moment. Nina got up on that stage and said no thank you to the script. No thank you to the lies. No thank you to being a puppet in somebody else's show. And when she called out Victor Ashford, the uncle nobody mentioned, the shadow player, the real snake in the garden, oh, I felt that in my soul. Because here's the thing. We spent 4 chapters thinking Harlan was the villain. And don't get me wrong, that man is cold. He's cruel. He called Nina an experiment and meant it. But he didn't try to poison her. His brother did. His own brother used Nina as a weapon to destroy him. Blood really is thicker than water, huh? Too bad it's usually thicker because someone's bleeding. And poor Destiny. Poor Destiny. The shift lead with the sick mama and the struggling sister? Working for Victor the whole time. Feeding Nina exactly what Victor wanted her to find. Trust in no one, babies. Trust no one except yourself and maybe the people who prove themselves when it costs them something. Which brings us to Harlan saying bring it on that stage. Standing beside the woman he tried to drive away. Ordering the audit that exposed his own brother. That's not redemption. Not yet. But it's a start. Next chapter, we find out how this whole mess gets resolved. And whether Nina gets to keep her husband, her dignity, and maybe, just maybe, her new family. Stay with me. We're almost home.
The negotiation lasted 6 hours. Nina wasn't present for most of it. Lawyers, board members, and decades of family grievances took precedence. But she heard pieces through the walls. Raised voices. Threats. The occasional crash of something expensive meeting the floor. Caleb sat beside her in the hallway outside Harlan's office. His hand wrapped around hers like she was the only anchor in a storm. Whatever happens in there, he said quietly, I need you to know something. What? I choose you. He turned to face her, eyes red-rimmed, but clear. Not the company. Not my inheritance. Not my father's approval. You. Nina felt something crack open in her chest. Caleb, I spent my whole life trying to be worthy of this family, trying to earn something that was supposed to be unconditional. His voice broke. But love isn't supposed to be earned, Nina. It's supposed to be given. And you're the only person who's ever made me feel like I was enough exactly as I am. She pulled him into her arms, held him while he shook. This golden boy who'd been raised in a gilded cage, finally letting himself feel the weight of the bars. I choose you too, she whispered. The office doors opened at 11 p.m. Harlan emerged first, looking like a man who'd aged 10 years in 6 hours. His tie was loosened, his hair disheveled, the polished patriarch replaced by something rawer, more human. Behind him, Victor was escorted out by security. His face was blank, his posture rigid, a man who'd gambled everything and lost. It's done, Harlan said. Caleb stood. What happened? Victor has agreed to divest his shares. Quietly. In exchange, we won't pursue criminal charges for what he did to Nina. Harlan's jaw tightened. The board has accepted his resignation. Blythe has been terminated, along with everyone else in his network. And Pike? Nina asked. Pike is cooperating fully. Turns out Victor promised him a VP position once the takeover was complete. He's willing to testify to everything in exchange for immunity. Harlan paused. He also confirmed that the substance in your coffee was an industrial additive, something we used to enhance the mouthfeel of cheaper beans. It's not dangerous in small amounts, but concentrated. He couldn't finish. Concentrated. It made me sick, Nina said flatly. On purpose. Yes. The word hung in the air like smoke. Why? Nina asked. Why did Victor want me gone so badly? Harlan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tired. Old. Because you were an unknown variable. Victor's plan depended on Caleb being isolated. Controllable. A grieving widower or a humiliated divorce would have been easier to manipulate than a married man with a wife who asks questions. He met her eyes. You were supposed to be weak, Nina. A charity case who'd crumble under pressure and run home. Instead, you fought back. And that terrified him. Nina thought about the first time she'd met Victor. She couldn't remember it, because she never had. He'd stayed in the shadows the entire time, pulling strings, moving pieces, waiting for his moment. What about the additive? Caleb asked. The one they put in the coffee. You said you used it? Harlan's face darkened. That's the part that's harder to explain. They moved to the tasting room, the scene of so many secrets, now flooded with fluorescent light and stripped of its mystique. Harlan stood by the window, staring out at the river. When I started this company, I had nothing, less than nothing. I was a busboy who couldn't afford coffee, building a coffee empire. He laughed bitterly. The irony wasn't lost on me. Nina and Caleb sat at the mahogany table, waiting. In the early years, margins were impossible. Quality beans cost money I didn't have. So I found shortcuts. Additives that made cheap beans taste expensive. Fillers that stretched inventory. Nothing dangerous. At least, that's what I told myself. Just necessary compromises. You cheated, Nina said. I survived. Harlan turned to face them. And then I succeeded. And then I got rich enough that I didn't need the shortcuts anymore. But by then, the infrastructure was built. The suppliers were locked in. And some parts of the business kept using the old methods because it was easier, cheaper. The black goo in my coffee, Nina realized. It wasn't just meant to make me sick. It was evidence. If you'd gone public with that cup, had the residue analyzed, you would have exposed practices I've been trying to bury for 20 years. Harlan's voice was hollow. Victor knew about it. He was the one who found the original suppliers, back when we were partners. He's been holding it over me ever since. So when he sabotaged Nina, Caleb started. He was killing two birds with one stone. Get rid of your wife and create a scandal that would force me out. Harlan sat down heavily. I didn't order the coffee, Caleb. I need you to believe that. I wanted Nina gone, yes. I was cruel and dismissive, and I tried to push her out with money and pressure. But I never wanted her hurt. The room was silent. Nina looked at this man, this complicated, damaged, infuriating man who had made her life miserable for weeks, who had called her an experiment, who had questioned her worth at every turn, but who had also shut down the rehearsal to protect her, who had fired the man mocking her, who had said bring it on that stage and blown up his own empire rather than let his brother win. I believe you, she said finally. Harlan's composure cracked. Just for a second. Just enough to show the human underneath. You shouldn't, he said roughly. I don't deserve it. Maybe not. But I'm giving it anyway. Nina stood. That's what grace looks like, Harlan. You don't earn it. It's given. She saw Caleb's words reflected back in her own. Saw Harlan recognize them too. So what happens now? She asked. What happened now was a complete restructuring of Ashford Coffee. Over the next month, Harlan announced a transparency initiative that sent shockwaves through the industry. Full disclosure of sourcing practices, independent audits, a complete elimination of the additives that had built his empire's dirty foundation. It cost millions. Stock prices tumbled. Investors fled. But something else happened too. Customers came back. Not the investors or the elite clientele, regular people. The ones who'd heard about Nina's story, about a waitress who married into money and refused to be silenced. They bought Ashford Coffee not despite the scandal, but because of how the company had responded to it. Authenticity, it turned out, was worth more than polish. You're sure about this? Nina stood in Harlan's office, a single document on the desk between them. He'd asked her to come alone. I'm sure. Harlan pushed the paper toward her. It's not money. I know you don't want that. It's authority. Real decision-making power over the new product line. The one you'll be developing. Nina looked at the document. It was a partnership agreement. Not a gift. Not charity. An actual stake in the company she'd helped save. Why me? Because you know coffee. Harlan's voice was matter-of-fact. I've tasted your blends. Caleb snuck me samples from that little roaster you set up in the garage. You have instincts I can't buy and can't teach. Nina hadn't known Caleb had done that. She'd been experimenting for weeks, using the high-end equipment that came with the marriage, creating blends that reminded her of the diner. Honest, simple, good. I also want you to know. Harlan hesitated. This was clearly hard for him. I was wrong. About you. About what you represent. I spent 50 years running from where I came from, and then I punished you for reminding me of it. He met her eyes. That wasn't fair. And I'm sorry. An apology. From Harlan Ashford. Nina wasn't sure the world could handle it. I'm not going to pretend we're family now, she said carefully. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I'm willing to try. If you are. Harlan nodded slowly. That's more than I deserve. Yeah. Nina picked up the pen. It is. She signed the document. 6 months later, the first batch of Homecoming blend hit the shelves. The packaging was simple. No gold embossing, no pretentious descriptions. Just a coffee bag with a small logo and the words, Honest Coffee for Real Mornings. Nina had developed it herself, sourcing beans from small farms, roasting them in small batches, pricing them for actual humans instead of collectors. It sold out in 3 days. The morning of the 6-month anniversary of the launch, and not coincidentally, the 6-month anniversary of the day Nina's life had exploded on live television. She woke up early. The Savannah sun was just cresting the horizon. The river glittered outside the window of the home she and Caleb had bought together. Not the family estate. They'd left that behind. A smaller place. A real place. Theirs. She padded to the kitchen and made coffee. Not from the Ashford roastery. Not from her own line. From a bag of beans she'd brought from the diner back home, sent by her old boss with a note that said, "Saw you on TV. Always knew you'd be somebody. These are on the house." She brewed it slowly, carefully, the way her mother had taught her, back when coffee was a luxury they could barely afford. The smell filled the kitchen. Rich, simple, honest. Caleb appeared in the doorway, hair mussed, eyes soft with sleep. "You're up early." Couldn't sleep. She poured him a cup. "Good dreams." He took the mug, breathed in the steam. "This isn't ours, is it?" "No. It's from home." He smiled. That smile that had made her fall in love with him in the first place, before she knew about the money, the family, the empire. When he was just a man in a diner who looked at her like she mattered. "Home," he repeated. "I like that." They stood together in the kitchen, watching the sun rise over their new life. Behind them was chaos, betrayal, a family that had nearly torn itself apart. Ahead was uncertainty, challenge, the endless work of building something real. But right now, in this moment, there was just coffee. Good coffee, made by hand, shared with love, drunk in silence while the world woke up around them. Nina took a sip. It tasted like a new beginning.
And there it is, babies. The ending. The resolution. The moment where Nina finally gets to exhale. Now look. This ain't a fairy tale. Harlan didn't suddenly become Father of the Year. The family trauma didn't evaporate. Victor's out there somewhere, probably plotting his comeback like the villain in a sequel nobody asked for. But Nina got something better than a fairy tale. She got real. Real authority. Real partnership. Real respect from a man who spent 50 years forgetting how to give it. And she got Caleb. Not the heir to a fortune, the man. The one who chose her when choosing her meant losing everything else. Some people marry into money and lose themselves. Some people marry into chaos and find themselves. Nina walked into a viper pit and came out with venom in her pocket and a recipe for the best darn coffee you ever tasted. That's not luck, honey. That's character. So here's what I want y'all to take from this story. When somebody tries to poison your cup, don't just survive, investigate. Don't just fight back, strategize. And when the dust settles, don't just heal, build. Nina built something. From the ashes of somebody else's empire, she carved out a little piece that was hers. And she did it without becoming the monster she was fighting. That's the real victory. Not the money. Not the revenge. The fact that she came through the fire and still knew how to make a good cup of coffee in the morning. All right, babies, that's our story. If you enjoyed this mess, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, tell your mama, tell your cousins, tell that one aunt who lives for drama but pretends she doesn't. And remember, if anybody ever hands you a fancy coffee in a mansion, take a good long look at that lid first. Until next time.